Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about Radious Total War for Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. It has been updated for the Tides of Torment DLC, as well as the latest hotfix. In this video, I want to talk about Lord Aislinn's campaign and the kind of changes Radious does make to it, and the game in general. See, what Radious does, and what its focus is on, is creating a lot more interesting scenarios on the campaign map. Lots of wars, bigger wars, more armies, reduced upkeep for units, though there are some mods that remove that if you don't want to deal with 100 different armies on the campaign map. And on top of that, it also rebalances the way units work, in particular with armor. Now, the reason that's so important is, by default, in the game, a lot of factions have very low armored units, which means they're really bad, they're not resolved, they get trampled by different AI factions that have good armor on their units, and also trampled by the player. That's not how it works in Radious. There's more units across the board that have similar levels of armor. Keep in mind, however, just because armor is of a certain value doesn't mean that factions don't have a lot of variety, because they do. Another thing that Radious Total War does is add a significant number of units to the game. Now, some people dislike this aspect of Radious Total War because they say, well, it's just adding bloat. But here's the thing about a lot of these units. They're not designed to be used throughout the entire course of the campaign. They're designed to be used at specific points of a campaign. So you have early game units, then you have mid game units, then you have late game units. And this applies across the board. So when we look at infantry, for instance, at a very high level, you can look at Maiden Guard or Night-Held Spearmen to consider elite high elven infantry. But of course, again, those are just high-level units. At lower levels, you have a wider variety of units as well. The goal here is that at every point in your campaign, you just have viable units to recruit at that tier, and you're not just recruiting the same stuff over and over and over again throughout the course of your entire campaign. And I think that's good. Some people may not appreciate it, absolutely, but that is the intent over here with Radious Total War, and one of the things I like. Battles also do play out very differently than they do in the base game because of the changed values of units. So an army might break, then come back, then break again. You have that cycle. Kind of reminds me how very old school Total War battles would play out. And that is, I think, a good element to it. I would recommend not playing this on higher AI stats, because these kind of things are balanced around the idea of neutral AI stats or normal difficulty. So keep that specific aspect in mind. Now, having said that, what is different for Aislinn? Well, some things are for the better. You do get more resources, and you do get them faster, which is pretty important. And the reason it's important is because in the base game, Aislinn's campaign, he can do the campaign very quickly, but because of that limitation on resources, he's actually going to have just be using the same units over and over again. You will win with ship company, spearmen, and archers the entire campaign, but you won't really get very far away. So, as an example, right here, for instance, you get more dedication through the seats of the Sea Lord. That, I think, is better because it means you can unlock more things in Asura Domination faster, which increases the campaign variety. There's a bit more trade as well, though maybe not as much as it should be. And if there is a criticism I would have with a lot of mods, is they don't necessarily go to fix these kind of fundamental issues that a lot of campaigns do have. So one of the annoying things with Aislinn is he has a lot of elven trade that he should be spending, but because it's so limited, you end up in a situation where you don't really have a lot of things to... you don't have a lot of elven traits, so you have to pick. So a lot of things that are not great, for instance, things in the Sea Patrol technology tree, just don't get used because of that situation with elven traits. So I think that's something they could have rebalanced further. Another thing to also mention is that with regards to Asur dedication, structures are still locked behind getting things in Asur domination, which was one of the bad designs of Aislinn's campaign. It still remains the case. You will have a lot more Asur domination. You will get it faster, but again, it's just one of those annoying factors in a campaign when you are playing it. Okay, so that is still an issue, but less of an issue than in the base game, at least because you get a lot more Asur domination, you get more resources in general, though I think you should be getting more resources overall, maybe reducing the costs of certain things like research and structures and building requirements tied to Asur domination. And it's also annoying that you have to spend a lot of Asur domination in order to unlock additional dragon ships, because it means a lot of those dragon ships don't get used up. And then one of the problems is that Creative Assembly has prevented Aislinn from region trading. So you take elven colonies and you can't trade them to factions. This is not really an issue with high elven factions, but it is an issue with different races. It used to be different in the pre-release version, then Creative Assembly changed it, I think, very close to the release of Tides of Torment. So that's absolutely an annoying factor. But what have the Radius team changed for Aislinn? Well, first off, you get a lot more elven colonies. So right here in this campaign, I have 7 elven colonies. So if you want to take over a lot of regular settlements, though it may not necessarily be useful to do so, but if you want to take a lot of these settlements, including your entire initial province, you can do so right now. Again, there's reasons why you wouldn't want to do it, because Aislinn's elven colonies end up being fairly lackluster. A lot of the economic buildings here require you to spend elven trade, and you just, again, don't have it, and also population surplus and all that kind of stuff. I believe some of there's been certain changes with regards to some of the buildings, hero capacity, etc. But again, a lot of things do remain the same. So they've made the mod work with Tides of Torment, but I don't think they necessarily changed the things that they should have changed in order to make, say, Aislinn or the campaigns more attractive. Like, you look at the patrons of the realms. Yes, you may have a lot more influence. Like, I think I had 500 by this point, actually, before I spent it on upgrading those seats. But the seats themselves, I think, are very similar to where they were before. And, yeah, certain changes could have been made there. But there are a bunch of technology changes over here. Certain details have been, made different in some ways. Many things have remained the same, but again, some details have been changed, some things have remained the same, a lot more things have remained the same as they were by default. I think there's new technology trees and all that kind of stuff. So those are some changes with regards to that. You do get elven colony availability, and you do maintain many of the same benefits that Aislinn does have by default, as well as, melee attack, melee defense for Ship Company. Which, by the way, Ship Company are not just the default ones you got used to. No, you got things like Great Swords, Ship Company, Halberd, Ship Company. So you don't just have the weak version. They're a higher tier unit. They're not just recruited from tier 1 ports, they're recruited from tier 3 ones. So they're a lot more useful, a lot more powerful in a campaign than they were before. Like, you look at armor, you look at stats, you look at the leadership, these are pretty good units right here compared to the base game. And yeah, again, many things have remained the same in quite a lot of different ways with regards to Aislinn, his skill line, etc. But a very important thing to be mentioned about Radious Total War is that you do get double skills per level. So that means you actually have more choices. Like, you will eventually unlock everything, but because you get so many skills while you're leveling, you are not so limited as you are by default. So, for instance, usually when I play a campaign, what I'll do is I'll pick up, let's say, 5 skills. So I'll get like Bowmaster, Inspiring Presence, and Rune Marcher. Then I'll wait till level 12 or a higher level in order to unlock the special skill line. But you don't need to do that when you're playing Radious Total War. So that's a pretty good change. It means you have, and certain skills are no longer exclusive as they are in the base game. So again, different choices, different ways of focusing on the leveling of heroes and lords, I would say especially. Like heroes, maybe not so much, but certainly lords do end up working a lot better than they do in the base game. You also have the addition of like the Anointed of Assyrian. Some people have talked about like the Anointed of Assyrian should have been the lord choice of Tides of Torment, but especially with Caradhrian. But you know, my perspective on that, I think then Sea Helms should have been the heroes if they wanted to do Anointed of Assyrian, or they could have made Anointed the heroes of the DLC as opposed to just giving us an extra mage. Just, you know, a perspective right there. But yeah, you do get Will of Assyrian, so you have, they're kind of like mini Caradhrians, but like lore choices as opposed to hero choices with regards to that. And if you're wondering how I got Daniel straight, well, that's a different mod that I'm using over here with respect to this. But overall, I think, is it a better campaign? Yes, I do believe so, without a doubt. That is a better campaign than the default one. One of the things I would say with Aislinn is that he is so good on the campaign map that very few people can give him any kind of challenge. And since he's fighting quite a few vampire coasts, like, your incentive structure is to go for Lustria and Ulthuan, deal with Noctilus, deal with Harkon. Lustria because it's the fastest one you can do, going for Noctilus to, you know, remove the threat to Ulthuan. But because Vampire Coast by default has a really shitty auto-resolve, then you don't end up having to fight a lot of interesting battles. And then, of course, there's all those pirate treasures that litter the sea, which also spawn Vampire Coast armies. Those armies are far more dangerous than they are in the base game, simply because of the reality of improved auto-resolve. Like, over here, Noctilus, for instance, has taken Lothringen, which, like, Tyrion is still alive, barely, but he has, and he's actually taken a good amount of territory, but, again, you would not see Noctilus taking Lothringen in the base game just because of the strength of the garrison that it has by default. But because Vampire Coast have a better resolve as a result of the armor that their units have here, means that they're a lot more dangerous. They're more dangerous in battle. They're more dangerous on the campaign map as well, because they still retain the capability of recruiting a lot of units out of practically nothing. Like, for instance, we have over here an army that's lost pretty much everything in it, and you know, the same turn they lost everything, they just recruited a bunch of units because Ray's dead of Vampire Coast. So Vampire Coast is a lot more worthwhile, which means Aislinn's foes are more worthwhile, which means his campaign ends up being more interesting. I think they should have improved Elven trade, dragon ship supplies. The problem that exists with regards to that is you end up having a very small trickle of these resources. It's better here, again, it's better. But you have a trickle of those resources and you have far more than you can spend on. And that's not an interesting campaign structure. But that's on CA, not the mod makers. For what it's worth, the mod makers have improved these things across board, but maybe not as much as they should have. And that would be my perspective with regards to Radious Total War. I guess in general, it does create more interesting battle scenarios. It does make foes more interesting to fight, because more skill lines, they also have more skill points. And that means, and since skill points dictate how powerful an army is in battle, combined with the fact you can't just auto-resolve willy-nilly simply because everyone is better on auto-resolve, or more equal, I guess I would say, that does force you to fight a lot more battles, more variety of units in battles, more powerful leaders leading those armies, which does create a far better campaign dynamic for you to deal with. That's the main benefit of Radius. Again, doesn't necessarily go far enough in terms of the campaign changes as I personally believe it should, but that's where I stand. Costin signing out. Stay tuned for more.